Hi everyone, I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social, and I'm lucky to be joined by Emily Foster, who is an architectural apprentice at AHMM. Emily, thank you for joining me, especially on a Friday night. How are you?
No, I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. We're living it up right now, aren't we? So Friday night, I've got nothing here but glasses of water, and we're in coronavirus world, but that doesn't stop the fun happening. We're going to have a bit of fun anyways.
Yeah. No, sorry, I thought you were going to say something after that.
Oh my, that is the tone of it. There we go. We managed to get a horn in already. Okay, all right. I Friday night, Friday fun and learning. Do you think that we can do it? Learning and fun exists? We'll see. We'll see if we can make this fun.
Yeah.
So Emily, I was curious about the architectural apprentice scheme. So I done my part 1 and part 2. Back in the old days when dinosaurs were walking the world, I was going to the university in Westminster part 1 because I feel that old sometimes. But basically, things have changed since then. Things have changed since I've been a part 1, and you can do this this apprentice scheme, and I think it's from what I know of the scheme, it seems really a really interesting way, an accessible way to learn architecture, to practice architecture while studying. First of all, what made you decide to study architecture?
Well, I'm not the sort of person who was like, since when I was 3 years old, I've always wanted to do architecture. I kind of, when I was 12, I saw Centre Pompidou and thought, wow, that's amazing. But I didn't think, I can design something like that. I can go on to do something. I just put it aside on pause for a second. Yeah. And then what kind of got me into it was just before going into sixth form, I was very lucky to have an amazing art teacher who literally before we got into the sixth form, she emailed all the art students and said, look, there's this program called the Accelerate program where UCL and partnered with a bunch of architecture practices to give students from underprivileged backgrounds to show them what architecture is all about and get them interested. So that's how I met AHMM, the current practice that I'm at.
Amazing.
They were my mentors. So this is in 2016.
Wow.
So that's how I got introduced to the world of architecture. It was really amazing. I got to be mentored by 2 real life architects and just go into the office and see what it's like. Look at the model making workshop. Just have a bit of fun with it, really, and look to see what it's all about.
That's fascinating. So you sign up to the apprentice scheme, and is it almost like going to Hogwarts with the hat that chooses which house you're in, and it's like you are going to be with AHMM, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want that would be pretty cool, actually.
Well, do you have any info? Because the thing is, I know AHMM, and they're a really successful architecture practice. And actually, any architectural practice that you're going to be an apprentice with, you're going to learn a lot from, whether it's a famous one or not. Yeah. AHMM, though, is a great company. And so, at the time, did you know much about AHMM? When they said they were going to be your mentors? So
2016, that was when I was mentored by them as part of this Accelerate scheme. And that's when I was first introduced to them. So it's pretty amazing how I knew them before. So when I decided to apply to an apprenticeship, so this would be years later after A-levels. So normally to apply to an apprenticeship, you would need to have done your GCSEs and A-levels, and you can apply alongside your UCAS. So you can apply to do the apprenticeship in the normal route through UCAS, and then also apply to an apprenticeship. So the difference between the apprenticeship and the degree path is, so degree, you do your 3 years, doing your bachelor's, and then going on to do your year out. The apprenticeship route is 4 years. So you study your degree part-time. So I go into university 1 day a week, and then the rest of the week, 4 days a week, I work. So it's pretty nice doing that, kind of like seeing the two different worlds. So I still get that freedom of doing those more creative things. Like for my last project, I designed a mushroom farm at London South Bank University, where I do the my bachelor's, and then I get to work on real life projects, working at AHMM. It's brilliant.
Amazing. That's definitely interesting. So I went into architecture, did my part 1 full time. And I was lucky in third year that I went for, I think it was like 3 to 4 weeks at an architectural practice. And you kind of learned the ropes there. It was kind of a shell shock at the time, though. It was definitely a wake to the system. And when you go into your part 1, it can feel an overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming because you don't know that world, and it is such a juxtaposition compared to the more theoretical side of studying architecture. Whereas I imagine what's interesting about your course, it kind of grounds you, right? So it's not a shock to you at all. So do you find then that what you did in practice informed, because you touched upon that you did quite some creative projects, but did your architecture, your experience in architecture inform your academic work?
Yeah. So, I mean, so as part of the apprenticeship, you're given a mentor at your practice. So normally you're given a mentor to work with you throughout your whole apprenticeship. Whereas for me, because I'm at a big practice, I get to work on different teams as well as different projects. So every 6 months I switch teams, which I think happens anyway for people doing their year out or working in architecture practices. So I switch mentors as well. So I get all these meet all these different people and gain lots of insight from these different people. And I've also have a kind of network of apprentices at AHMM already. So I'm the only level 6, so architectural assistant apprentice at AHMM. And then there are five other level 7 apprentices. So these guys are the ones who do their masters, their part 2 and part 3 through the apprenticeship route. So that's really amazing. I get feedback on my university work, as well as knowing how to work efficiently, get all this insight from people who have gone through it before.
That's interesting. And so you might have touched upon it a bit there. So if you're level 6, what's level 1?
Okay. So
sorry, is that silly?
No, it's not silly at all. I didn't know this. Even though, so if you go through UCAS, you might see. So when people apply, they ask for, what's your level 2 qualification, level 3. So level 2 is GCSE. So that's the level 2 qualification level. And then level 3 is A levels or pre-U. I did pre-university. It's the same. And there's also an art foundation, which I did. So I took a year out after doing my A levels because I wanted to gain more experience, and I wanted to have that time to do work experience at different practices. So my mentors were really helpful in that. I got through one of them, I got a contact in Hawkins Brown, so I did 1 week work experience there, and then through just sheer emailing the practices that I liked, I also volunteered at 6A. Not volunteered. Did work experience at 6A Architects and 3D Read. So that was really really nice, because I think a key thing to do is to know whether you want to work at a smaller practice or a bigger practice, because both of those experiences are really different. So for me, I liked I knew AHMM, so it was a no-brainer to go for them, and I knew that they had a just really nice working environment, and I knew I could get to see lots of different projects and work on different teams. Whereas for a smaller practice, it's rewarding to go for a smaller practice as well, because you get to have more of an overall feel for a project. So you might be able to see a project from start to end, whereas for me, I'm just shifting between lots of different ones.
Amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the original question? Hang on, I've lost my way a bit.
It was the levels. No, you answered it really well. Yeah, you did it. You definitely did it. And so, because it's quite interesting, the visual. So you you started your apprentice scheme in 2016. So hang on, I may have confused it a bit. So 2016, that's I'd completed GCSEs, and I went on to do an Accelerate into University scheme in conjunction with UCL and various architecture practices, including AHMM. And that's how I found out about them. So I had this year-long mentoring scheme with them, where I learned about architecture. And this is in which year? 2000.
So this is 2016.
Yeah.
So I did my A-levels for the 2 years after, completed my A-levels in 2018. I knew about the apprenticeship scheme beforehand. It was still in its kind of early days. There weren't many apprentices, maybe it'd gone through one cohort. But I originally was going to go I had an offer at the Bartlett, but I didn't make the grades, which I think was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, to be honest, because I had this apprenticeship thing in the back of my mind thinking, I really prefer doing that because then I get actual experience and like just really get stuck into it. So that's how I got into this foundation year afterwards at Ravensbourne University. So this is 2018 was the A-level results day. Afterwards, Ravensbourne, and that's how. And then afterwards, the way so earlier you were talking about sorting hats and how you decide which practice you go with, the whole process. So the way it works is first you go for your office, so the place you want to work at. So you just apply directly to them, or some practices put up adverts saying we're looking for apprentices, but a lot of the time, like all the apprentice people that I know, mostly approached companies and like you have to educate. There's a level of education involved here where you have to educate practices about the apprenticeship, explain to them the situation, how great it is. I mean, it really is great. You get paid. You're debt free, so you don't pay student tuition for the university that you go to. So that's, I think, paid by the government.
Wow.
I mean, it's great. I mean, you gain insight to working at an architecture firm, and you get to apply that knowledge, the knowledge that you gain from university, immediately into practice. It's amazing.
Yeah. So hang on. So this is the discovery here. So you're saying that you do not pay £9,000 per year because it's subsidized by the government because of all the good work you do, contributing to the industry, contributing to the wider good of architecture and construction.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I like it. Oh, I got to turn my phone off. My phone's on. I'm not very professional, is it? But I think maybe someone on the phone is equally impressed by the scheme. That is amazing because that actually, I remember that in the year before me, because I started in university so in 2006, and they just about introduced the fees up to £3,000. And I came from humble roots. My parents were really, really supportive of me. They always tried to give whatever they could. I just still had to do a bit of work. So my part-time job while studying architecture was working at Waitrose, and it was still good experience because you learn stuff and dealing with people.
Yeah.
But the apprentice scheme definitely has a lot of value. There's so much value. Yeah. But now, so you're talking a full year university is £9,000 before you even get going. And so you're alleviated from that because you're jumping straight into the economy and you're helping the practice out. But what is interesting from what you're saying is you've effectively started the job search while you're being an apprentice, because as you said, you've got to educate companies. And what's interesting is I agree. If you're not aware of it from their point of view, there's a few incentives that you highlighted from your perspective. In terms of the employer, I imagine they also get so if there's any employers listening here, in terms of the scheme being interesting, they must get, is it a tax break as well, or they get the government pays towards your salary? Is there something like that involved?
I think they put aside this pot of money that goes towards apprenticeships. This I think it's the apprenticeship levy, and so they have this amount of money that they've put aside. If they don't spend that on having their own apprentices, then that money ultimately just zooms off and goes into this massive pot of money that distributes to smaller practices. So that's how smaller practices are able to have their own apprentices.
Got it. So there's a pot, and basically they can take advantage of it or not, and it's there. So it helps them as a business, and it helps you out. And obviously, this is given back to the industry. So yeah, great scheme. And actually, from an employer's perspective, why I would be interested is because in a traditional sense, when you get a part one, there's sometimes a slim chance they've worked part-time during their studies, the old-fashioned way, which was like I knew someone that would do a day or two per week, a little bit in the office. But by and large, an architectural assistant, when they come out, it needs to be trained up anyways. So, and then there's no government pot there. So if I'm an employer, so let me get this straight. So if I'm hiring you as an apprentice, you've already worked in industry because you've done it for how many years? 2 or 3 years or something while studying?
Yeah. So this will be 4 years. So this is 4 years for the part one.
Yeah. So by the time you finish, you've got your part one as an apprentice. You'll have worked 4 years in industry. Okay. And so that's a massive advantage. I'd be very inclined to go with you because from putting my employer's hat on, then I would be thinking, Emily, you're quite a safe pair of hands because you're familiar with the culture of an office, the procedures and so forth. Because there's a lot of things that as you know, when you go to an architectural practice now, that, as I say, AHMM, I imagine a lot of buildings are modeled in BIM. So you understand how to access a BIM model, how not to crash it, how files are set up in the company, how our employees set up everything, right? I'm guessing and all this stuff. You know, how it all trickles down into how 300 employees organize a practice. You know liability, you know that drawings need to be signed off. You learn all the things. Yeah. How to go about your job, where files are, how to start doing a detail, what are the company procedures. And they are the things that a traditional part one like myself, when you join, you kind of have to learn in the first few weeks, which is definitely a system shock. It was for me. You can do it every week. There's so many people that have done it. So you kind of have a step up, but it's not almost like it's unfair because you've worked during it. You're working. It's not as if, and this is the distinction we got here. So it's a great opportunity. Point is though, you're working, right? And so if you're not performing, then that's not going to work, right? Because they have a choice to keep you or not as well, I'd imagine, isn't it? It's effectively, the apprentice scheme is an employment. So obviously you want to do well. But what I'm saying is, it's not like you're rocking in there and opening up the newspaper. You get serious tasks. So, I mean, so let's not go into any project confidentials or anything like that. In terms of a general sense, though, what kind of projects did you work on? Have you worked on any big schools or big residential schemes? What kind of responsibilities, without giving project details away, have you seen as an apprentice so that people can get a flavor of the kind of tasks they work on?
Yeah, so I've been working for a year, so I'm about to go into my second year. Well, I am just begun my second year. And I've already worked on so many things. So I've worked on like master plans, offices, residential, like different scales as well. So it could be like like a group of like 4 flats maybe, or like massive like residential towers. Like it's pretty amazing. I've worked on like lots of like various things. It's it's amazing.
That's cool because I always I've got a flashback to when I was here in my third year, and I was the good thing when you're studying architecture, and you kind of touched upon it a bit, is that there is something nice about in university being free to do creative projects such as mushroom factory or what have you. I had a similar thing where these kinetic apartments, but what was hilarious, I look back and I had no grounding, or let me rephrase that. It was completely wild, and I wouldn't know where to begin detailing it or how the building stood up. I mean, I got a 2-1, but it was that year out in industry afterwards that in my part 2 then started to make let me rephrase it. So I think it's important to be imaginative. And then in my part 2, the buildings were more imaginative, yet realistic, because in my year out, you think, oh my gosh, you can't do that in real life. Or so it informs it in a way which is stronger and better. That's my opinion.
I mean, that's something. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I love it. Go on. It's good. That's something I
can definitely see in, the cohort that I have of apprentices. So at London South Bank University, there are about 20 of us, all from different areas of the UK. So there's someone who comes all the way from Durham for that 1 day a week. Although now he's probably very happy because we're all doing it from home, so he doesn't have to commute. But yeah, there are lots of different expertise. So lots of people are good at Revit, ArchiCAD, because of that. The practicing at work and constantly using it, and I can see that their designs are more edging towards the realistic, but still really imaginative and amazing. Nice. I can definitely see that. I mean, it's brilliant. And then you've got what's nice as well is that we get to mix with the full timers as well. So they've got more knowledge perhaps on the theory side, and they're more free with it. So we learn from them and then from each other. And they learn from us as well. So it's kind of a two-way street.
That sounds. I mean, to me, it's definitely something I would have seriously considered. And so there must be, because you mentioned the word cohorts, and there's more and more people are doing it. So, because the awareness, I never even heard of it. So, from a recruitment perspective, it's only like this year. Really, I'm starting to see people or practices talking about the architectural apprentice. And what was interesting is you're touching upon the bursary that the government has provided. And I've heard that a little bit. What is interesting, though, is that I imagine in the next 2 or 3 years, this will start becoming more and more prevalent. And actually, it sounds like a better way of doing things. What I kind of like as well is that you've got options of, imagine in the future, you can still have people doing it 100% theoretical before jumping into practice, as well as getting the industry experience. So when do you still have to do a year out then, like like a part 1?
So for me, I don't do a year out because I'm already kind of doing the industry
You're
part.
Already out. You're out. Yeah.
I'm already out.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in terms of like recording, like because in the normal one you have to record everything that you're doing in order for you to be able to do the stage 3, not stage 3. What I'm saying, part 3 at the end. So for us, we have to have 20% off the job learning. So that sounds really fancy, but it's basically as long as you go to university. So that's 1 day out of the 5-day week, so that's 20% already. But then you've got the summer where you're not going to university but you're still working, so you need to provide off the job learning at work. So that's when you put in stuff like any CPDs that you've gone to, or even like work shadowing, or Revit training as well. At the moment I've been doing that, and I've got Revit training coming up in a bit too. Ooh. So yeah, that's exciting.
Wow, that's definitely interesting. So you got masses of, so on one hand, we got massive experience. Let's say in the traditional sense, so we know that being an architect from beginning to end, if you do your year out and then you literally jump on board and do your Part 3 straight away, start to end, to become a qualified architect, you're looking at 7 years, and that's cramming it. How long would it take to be a qualified architect on the apprenticeship scheme?
So Part 1 is 4 years, and then you've got another 3 years to do the level 7 architect apprenticeship. So that's
same time.
Oh, is it 3 years? Oh no, sorry, I've got that wrong. It's 2 years, and then plus a term of kind of part-time stuff. So it's roughly the same, but you gain more industry experience.
Yeah, which is going to help during the Part 3 exam, probably. Yeah. So I'd imagine, because the idea when I was building my Part 2, before I went through in recruitment, I mean, the idea in your head to build it up in your Part 3 exam is quite, you're like, oh, they're going to ask me all kinds of questions. So actually, the amount of experience you get is really useful. So it sounds all quite positive to me. Are you enjoying it then so far?
Yeah,
sounds like you are.
It's really amazing. I mean, at the beginning, I remember being really intimidated, even though I'd kind of been there before, kind of being in the adult environment, which is why I think I definitely recommend doing a art foundation beforehand, because it's free and it's just a year of exploring and seeing what you want to do, who you are. So I definitely recommend that rather than going straight from A levels to working, because I think that's quite a daunting step. So doing that year beforehand really helped to kind of transition. And like everyone at the office is just amazing, super lovely. I kind of feel like I have a network of mentors. So I can just reach out to anyone and they'd be happy to help. It's really cool.
That's so cool. And so it sounds like AHMM are quite a supportive company, and your impression in working there, you enjoy working with AHMM, clearly, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're also part of the Trailblazer group. So they're one of the companies that helped to set it up in the first place. So they're very knowledgeable about the apprenticeship. So I've got a lot of support from that angle. So that's also perhaps something to look at when applying, guys.
I love it. Yeah, that's interesting. And Simon, now with his he heads up he's heading up Reba. He's always been quite supportive of students, actually, hasn't he? So I think it makes sense that AHMM are champion of the way in terms of architectural apprentices. Yeah. I love this scheme. I definitely want to see more of it. But sounds like you've got no regrets there. Would you give it? You touched upon it briefly, a little tip then. And what I found was interesting is that we definitely talked about in terms of you have to sometimes educate companies, and then once they understand the scheme, then they want to take advantage. Is there any tips that you would give to anyone considering both the traditional route and your route? Is there any thoughts or tips you'd have there?
Well, I think you have to consider that for university, it's an amazing experience to do that. The normal route of just going to university for those 3 years and then doing your year out, because you get to just fully. Because at the moment I'm living at home. I'm based in London, so it's quite easy to be able to commute. Well, back when we were commuting to AHMM, so I'm saving a bit of money from doing that.
Great.
But I guess what I'm missing out on is that university experience of hanging out with other students, having that kind of university life, maybe living independently if I was going to university outside of London. So there's that area of things to think about. Whereas I think with the apprenticeship, you're able to apply what you're doing in real life situations. So that the knowledge and stuff you're learning is real, that you can directly apply it. Whereas maybe at university you might be, it's more maybe theoretical, more like on the creative side, depending on which university you go to, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that's the fun thing about university sometimes, being able to explore. That's the thing that's missing, I think. I mean, I get to do that on those days at university, so I'm grateful for that. So that's definitely something to consider, guys.
Yes, interesting. You touched upon that, isn't it? So yeah, because you're effectively working. I can see what you mean because, and again, I'll get out, if you could see me here, because I know this is a podcast, I'm getting out my air quotes here, but I've heard alleged things from studying. And I think the first year, from certain people's experience, I don't know who that could be, definitely not me, is that the first year, yeah, you do learn and you do all that stuff. But for me, it was a laugh. Oh, I said for me, I rumbled myself already. Oh, no. Okay, maybe I had a bit of fun doing it as well as we all did. And there's definitely a case of doing all the architecture, eye rolls almost, of leaving things to the last minute. I've definitely spent, I said it again. I might have definitely, okay, I'll confess. In first year, you put things to the last minute, you kind of do all the crazy stuff, you do the print and you do the late nights, completely the opposite way of doing it. At the end of my part two, during my part two, I was definitely on form, and I think I did one or two all-nighters, but I think for my part one, I did definitely a lot of all-nighters, definitely a lot of having fun on campus. And yeah, it's that romantic. I know what you're on about. You're saying maybe the downside is you miss the romantic notion of being at uni, being in the dorms, being aloof, or, going on that crazy night out, or talking poetry and having crazy nights, staying up till the break of dawn. And there is a bit of that, but let me tell you, that is definitely a romantic notion, and bless every student right now who's locked up because of coronavirus. It's not the idea that image or that idea is slowly slipping away. I get what you're saying, because I wouldn't have changed mine, and I look back and it was fun. At the same time, though, I do think there's definitely a value of working your years out, being an architectural apprentice gives you something which springboards you and your career going forwards. It sounds like quite a mature way to do the course.
Yeah.
To study.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to be even more disciplined with your time, which is something that you're constantly learning throughout doing the apprenticeship. So balancing your university work with doing with working, because you have to work on your university work in the evenings and the weekends, rather than if you were going to university, you would have that kind of studio culture. You would, I still have a bit of studio culture when I go into university, but you have your dedicated slots where you're working, whereas you have to kind of allocate it yourself in the spare time you have. So that's something else to consider when doing the pure university thing versus the apprenticeship route. So that's something. Yeah.
Basically, it's not like you can rock up hungover at 11 o'clock and sneak into the back of the class. If the class is Tuesday and you're at AHMM, it's not a class; it's actually work.
Yeah.
And if you rock up hungover, that's going to be a painful working day for you. Struggling, dying behind the desk on Revit, going, "Oh, I hate my life." Yeah, okay. So I get it. So the pros and cons. Pros, massive experience. Not really a con, but it's more like you just need to be aware of you're effectively a professional straight away, so you can't rock up if you're hangover every day of the week. Okay, fair enough, really, isn't it? I think so. That's really interesting, and thank you for that. That's been a marvelous insight. So maybe I'm quite keen to learn one or two things while I got you here, and I really appreciate your time. So it sounds like you're enjoying it. Just first of all,
100%.
All right, cool. That's
no
awesome.
Regrets.
And you were in the scheme. You were enthusiastic about getting your part 3, right, and going the whole way, I'm guessing.
Well, at the moment, I'm taking it every day as it comes, every year as it comes. Maybe, I mean, that's another cool thing about the apprenticeship, is that after your 4 years, you might think, oh, I love this practice, I'll stay. Or you could go to a different practice and do your part 2/part 3. So that's the level 7 apprenticeship at another place. So that's pretty amazing as well.
Great.
So I want to make that clear.
Yeah, you're not stuck. It's like
you're not stuck.
It's basically like a job. It's where you want to do. You could be like AHMM. I've loved part one. I'm going to stay if you'll have me. Or you could be like, thank you very much. As I think it's important, I see different perspectives, so I know where AHMM have done it the right way, or maybe I can learn how another company like Hawkins Brown do it a different way. I think that's definitely interesting. All right, fantastic. And do you have much time outside of your job and studying, or is it full on? You touched upon it briefly when we talked before.
It's a full-time job in a way, because you're on the contract. You have your allocated holiday times the same as any other employee. I mean, I am the sort of person who really likes doing like extracurricular things and like going around doing things. So I think the other month, during August, I went to the Basque country and did this amazing model making course. Wow. Really cool. So that was for about a week, and that I found that really rewarding. And I really feed off doing those sort of things and going to exhibitions and going to art galleries. And what I find from AHMM is that a lot of people who work there are exactly the same. Like they love going. There are lots of people who love going to these different things. We have a sketch club, which is really amazing. We do like so I think we're going to be taking part in Inktober, and we're going to be doing it as a group. So we're going to be meeting up and sharing our drawings. That's a really nice thing about AHMM, having that kind of social side. So that was amazing. A really important thing for me.
That makes complete sense. But look, Emily, I really value all the time you've given, especially when I'm asking all these crazy questions. You're like, what are you on about talking about Hogwarts? So sorry, it was my analogy. But I got there in the end. Thank goodness. You think. And I've definitely learned a lot. I've learned a lot from this. So if anyone has any questions or anything, are they okay to message you on the Architecture Social?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, sometimes whenever I see people who say, oh, I'm interested in doing apprenticeships, I get in contact with them going, hey, I'm an apprentice. I can give you lots of information. So I'm more than happy if people message me and say, I'm interested, tell me more. So absolutely no problem.
Fantastic. So I really appreciate all the stuff that you're doing on the Architecture Social as well. And you're on LinkedIn for anyone not in the social and they want to listen. So we can find you on LinkedIn or on the Architecture Social. So yeah. Emily, any questions you want to ask me? None. Ooh, let's bring that on.
Out of curiosity, has anyone approached you as a recruiter asking about the apprenticeship?
Yeah, good question. No, short answer. No. Hasn't popped. No, not in architecture. Not in architecture. But I did have a client that I've known for many years who does construction and he mentioned about it. So I think that in construction, it's much wider. It's much more known. It's much more heard about. And I think in architecture is trickling in. What you will find, though, and I talked to this about my team, next week I'm going to do a live webinar where we're going to talk about demystifying recruitment, because a lot of people don't understand how it works. And that makes sense because no one talks about how recruitment works, the good parts and the crazy parts. So we're going to do that. What you'll find, though, is a general rule of thumb. A company will not approach a recruitment consultant for part one positions because they're entry roles. And I completely get that as well, because the way recruitment works in short is that I'm normally brought on when you in the future are running, let's pretend you've become a healthcare expert and you've got a big hospital and you've got a job coming up and you need to fill your team full of people, and you can probably find an apprentice and train them up, but you need an architect that's done 3 or 4 years of hospitals or labs. And so you'll say, Steve, I need you to find this person with Revit. They need to have that because that's the need. And then I will go, fine, that takes X amount of time. If I find this person, then there is a fee involved because I've gone out of my way and found someone. So recruitment is generally used when there's a particular need or niche. And so when you got a part one or an apprentice, they're kind of training you in to what they need is, isn't it? They probably got a project architect and a few part twos who help steer you. So that's generally why I'm not briefed on part one roles. Is very, very rare. And I haven't been briefed on an architectural assistant, an architectural apprentice. What I would say is that when discussing recruitment needs, I haven't heard predominantly much talk about architectural apprentice. It's starting to trickle in this year. As in, I'm starting to see a few more architectural practices advertise architectural apprentices and start to talk about them when I have a discussion with them on the strategic level. They'll say, we've got this level and we've got so many part twos and architectural apprentices.
Oh, cool.
Now, yeah, that sentence was never there before. It would be architectural assistant. So I think you hit the nail on the head when we were talking of, I think there needs to be a little bit more work on raising awareness of the apprenticeship scheme. Yeah. And actually, as a business owner right now in coronavirus world, it's probably really helpful, that this bursary is there. So I think that the need for architectural apprentices will grow more and more. Yeah. Hopefully that gives you an insight. And I will go into recruitment. We will talk about recruitment a bit more next week to explain it to everyone.
Awesome.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I think you're the first architecture recruiter I've been in contact with. I'm not really clued up in this kind of world. So,
yeah, and it makes sense. And truth be told, even when I was part one and a part two, I never used a recruitment consultant, nor do you need to as a part one. And recruitment consultants, you get more and more experience with down the line, a few more years in your career. And normally it would be, let's hypothetically say in the future, you've worked in a company for a few years and you might find that you're looking for a particular different set of skills. So you might be working on certain projects, or maybe let's pretend you're working in a different practice in AHMM, because there's a completely different company you've gone to, and you've been working long hours, which you've done because you've got good experience, but now you have a family in the future, Emily, and you're thinking, I can't do them hours anymore. I need to go to somewhere which works less hours and somewhere that can build upon the sectors. And that's what normally I would come in, we would speak, and I'd go, okay, these famous architectural practices, you're still going to get the long hours. And based upon your sectors and the software you've got, have you thought about these companies? And it could be Joe Blogs 1, and you might go, never heard of them. And then you look, and then I have to tell you a bit about the company culture. And we work out where you live, we go through the whole matchmaking process. Now, in coronavirus world, it is a bit more difficult because before, it is what was called a candidates market. Now, a candidate is a term used. It sounds a bit like Alan Sugar on The Apprentice, and that's what it is, a candidate, a client. But in short, what it meant is before coronavirus, say now you keep going the way you're going and you have all this experience, then in a nice way, when you come out, you've got a choice of where you want to go. Now it's a lot more difficult, as in a client can be, an architectural practice can be very strict upon their requirements, and because there's more people looking. So if a company is in a point to hire someone, they have a lot of choice. And so things have changed, and recruitment's changed for that. And so before, it was working out a person's needs and identifying a few companies for it. Now it's what I do is I work with a client and I have to go out and find exactly what they want. And that can be difficult right now because you can speak to talented people, and I have to be truthful and say, I don't have a role for you right now. And that doesn't mean that the person's not good. They can be amazing. Unfortunately, though, because of the requirements right now, if you haven't worked for 3 years on hotels, you might not get the role. And so generally that's how recruitment works right now. So next week I'll go into it in more detail. Now, the best thing that you said along that vein in this podcast, which was interesting, is that you effectively have done the role of recruitment for yourself. You have to educate the client on Architectural Apprentice is, there's business incentives for doing it. And the way it works is X, Y, Z. So they benefit from what the government's doing and they get you on board. And that education is key, because at first I imagine some of the reactions are, oh, we don't do that. I'm sorry. Yeah. And that's not because they're being rude or anything. They just don't know.
Yeah, they just don't know. I mean, with AHMM, I was lucky in the fact that they knew already. They were part of creating the whole thing. They knew. And when I was looking up, typing in architectural assistant apprentice on Google, there weren't many adverts back when I was typing that in. No. But I think BDP was another one that knew about it.
Okay.
But I think the best way to do it is to get work experience first and kind of get your foot in the door and kind of see if you like the practice, have a feel. And then maybe at the end of the work experience going, hey, there's this apprenticeship. Would you be happy taking me on? So I think that's the kind of route to go for, because if you think about it, these guys, they're taking on someone with no experience. They've just come out of A levels, maybe foundation year if they're lucky. So I think doing work experience beforehand, it's definitely helps. And also not necessarily the big ones, or if they're not advertising, just shoot them an email and just inform them that way.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because a few of the kind of the webinars that I did on the social during this time was talking to people about trying to get industry experience, because then what you're doing is you're showing that you've worked in a practice, you're showing that you understand how an architectural practice is set up. And basically what you're doing there is you're de-risking yourself. And so with yourself, when you've done work experience at AHMM, there's that element of, obviously you try and make a good impression. And so let's say you do that. From an employer's perspective, if I'm hiring, I'd be like, okay, Emily's already worked you for 3 weeks on Jeff's team. Jeff, what was Emily like? Yeah, she was good. She was really good. Da-da-da. And you go, oh, yeah, let's get Emily in. This takes the sting out of it, because you're then a known quantity. And when I say quantity, I don't mean like ones and zeros, of course, with people. What I mean is they know that you are reliable in some shape or form, because you've already gone in there, you've proven your worth, and you understand architectural practice. You understand a bit more, and therefore that's kind of inching you towards it. So that's one of the massive gains, I think, with this apprenticeship scheme, is that you're effectively getting yourself in the door. You're effectively de-risking yourself. But it's not all doom and gloom. If you're on a part one and you're like, oh no, why did I not do an apprentice? No, don't worry, you can still do it. And you got to remember what you're saying is the pros and cons. So if you're on a part one, you've had 3 years to have a bit of a giggle. You've had 3 years to learn to be super hypothetical. And okay, when you jump into practice, you can have a shell shock for a week or two. Okay. Pros and cons. That's what you're saying, isn't it? Whereas in your world, you're going to be a bit more souped up, ready for practice because you've been there. What was interesting and quite humble was what you're talking about of, maybe do I not have that campus feel? And so always pros and cons with everything. So it's all about looking forward. And what we're saying is, if you're the kind of person that wants to jump in, then Emily, you're giving the scheme a thumbs up from your experience.
Yeah. 100%. And also, if you're a part one and you think, I haven't done the apprenticeship, you could always do the apprenticeship for your part 2/part 3. So
no way.
I mean, you could
I didn't know that.
I said it earlier.
I think it's because there was so much info.
It's so much information.
Yeah, because okay. So you can elect to do it for your part 2.
So so your part 1. Level 6 architectural assistant apprenticeship. Then you can do 2 years of your level 7 architect apprenticeship. So there are I think five of them at my practice, and I'm the only kind of bachelor's level 6 apprentice. So you could always do it afterwards. So you can have best of both worlds, really. You can have that university experience and then go on to do the apprenticeship.
Okay, cool. So you can go, do you know what, I'm going to do my part 2 there. That is really interesting. And I think clearly my brain is shutting down around me. It's like, oh no, Stephen, wake up, Stephen Drew, hello. I'm fall asleep on this keyboard right now. And then half the podcast have been me snoring. But no, that's really, really interesting. I just sometimes, I think what it is getting my head around it. And I'm so intrinsically bashed into my head, the old formula, that this new formula, it's actually quite straightforward now you mention it, and I am surprised how flexible it is. So I really love that. So thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we all know where to find you. I'm going to go and wake up, have a coffee on Friday night.
Classic
Thank you so
coffee.
much, Emily.
No problem. Yes.